Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling. And we are now on February 3rd, 2021. We have been recording at the National Stewardship Action Council these meetings so that they're uploaded right after the meeting. If anybody wishes to look at them, they're on our website YouTube page. Commissioners, again, will use an asterisk in the chat box, and the chat box looks like it's up and running. So I can see you, hopefully, and if I miss you, just let me know. Public comments are posted live on the Calvert Cycle webpage. If you wish to comment during the meeting, you can use that portal, and there is no live interaction except with the presenters for this commission, the way the Calvert Cycle has set this up. And for commissioners are free to respond live to comments heard under agenda items, but not those under the agenda item that actually discusses things not on the agenda. Again, use the portal, please. We are getting a lot of comments via email when I get them, and it's just coming to me and maybe one other commissioner. I PDF them and upload them to the Google documents so everybody on the commission can see those comments. We had several of those during the last few days, so please make sure you check the Google documents. We're also creating, we've created a Google Doc folder for all the press we're seeing about commission and commission work. So if anybody sees press that you'd like to have us put into that folder, go ahead and send it to us and we'll upload it. Ted or I or any of the would be happy to do that for you. Just send it to us in a PDF if you would. And I did want to mention that today, because this is our first meeting with 2 hours, it's a very tight agenda. We did not have time to put on the agenda report outs by committees. We assumed that it would be early days, so we'll make sure on the next agenda we talk about any policies. I did not see any policies come forward from committees. I also did not have time to work on the format for the committee chairs to give us a report. We will have that done today so the committee chairs can use it for the next meeting. And I want to thank Commissioner Ward again. He did take the whole report and he got it translated into the accessibility standard, and that should be made live on the Calvert Cycle page any moment. So thank you again to Commissioner Ward for all that detail.
And much help from Calvert Cycle staff.
Yes, thank you to the Calvert Cycle staff as well. It's not easy. So with that, we'll go ahead and we will establish a quorum. So let's call everybody out. Let's see, Commissioner Bouchard? Here?
Here.
Commissioner Cadena?
I'm here.
Commissioner Davis?
Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Dell?
Here.
Commissioner Dunleavy?
Good morning. Here.
Morning. Commissioner Ferrante?
Here.
Commissioner Kalpakoff?
I'm on the phone right now. I'll be on video in about 20.
Sounds great. Thank you. Commissioner Lapis? Are we missing Commissioner Lapis? Okay. We'll make a note when he joins us. Hopefully somebody can text him, see if he's having any issues trying to get on. Commissioner Medrano?
Here.
Commissioner Potashner? Let's see, Commissioner Potashner.
Here. Sorry. Here. Here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Great. No problem. Myself, Heidi Sanborn, Commissioner Schneider?
Here.
Commissioner Sky?
Here.
Commissioner Toyota?
Here.
Commissioner Valle?
Here.
And Commissioner Ward is here.
Here.
So we've got a quorum, and we'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully we can finish pretty quickly.
Commissioner Oseguera is on too. Heidi.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss you? That's
Just for the record.
no important. That's ridiculous. I'm so sorry. Okay.
No worries.
Great. Got everybody. So we'll go ahead, and I did want to also say that because it's not on the agenda, I want to just let everybody know that Calvert Cycle is going to be sending each commissioner a link to a survey regarding their public education survey that they're going to send out, and they want to get your feedback before they do it. So I just told them to go ahead and send it, and if you could, when you get that, please send it back quickly so that they can keep moving. That would be much appreciated. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item number 2, review and potential approval of the meeting notes from the last meeting. Oh, Nick is on the chat saying, can you guys hear me? And the truth is, no, we cannot, Nick.
You cannot hear me?
Oh, now we can. Good. So we have all the commissioners. Thank you. I'm glad we can hear you. Good. All right. So we have everybody here. We'll move on to the meeting minutes. Did anybody have any comments on the meeting notes, or would you like to make a motion to approve them?
I'll move to approve.
Second? I'll second it then.
I'll second.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Sure, everybody gives a thumbs up and we've approved the meeting minutes so we can move on. Fabulous. All right. So we've done agenda item number 2. And let's go ahead and move on. And please mute yourself when you're not speaking, just to make sure we have limited background noise. Thanks. So agenda item number 3, public comment review for items not on the agenda. CalRecycle staff, are there any comments that were not on the agenda for items not on the agenda that we should read into the record?
There are none.
Okay. And can you explain, I've been my head down all morning. Can you tell me, are there any last minute comments that have been coming into the portal?
There are. They're almost exclusively about advanced recycling.
I'm sorry, you fuzzed out there. What? Almost.
They're almost exclusively about advanced recycling. Agenda item number 5.
Okay. Okay. So we'll read those maybe when we get to agenda item 5, and there are some comments that people had asked in emails that I'd like to answer in public with all the commissioners able to respond as well. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 4, consideration of an urgency recommendation letter on the CRV convenience. This is our second reading. We did hear this at our last meeting. We had a robust discussion. And so this was going to be our second reading to approve it and send it. And we have to be clear who we're going to send it to and who's going to do that as well. So I'll open it up. Are there any commissioners that would like to speak to this item? We did have quite a few comments from the public. I saw that the ones that I saw were all supportive of this. But if there's anyone who would like to comment to this now, please put your app in the chat. Or we can hear a motion. I'm only seeing Nick in the chat, so I'm not seeing anybody else with an asterisk. Am I missing something? No? Would anybody like to make a motion to just move this item? Are we ready to send this to the legislature? Commissioner Lapis?
Hey, I had sent a note to Jeff. Jeff, I wonder if you could comment on this, but a suggestion to add tiered processing payments as a recommendation.
As far as tiered processing payments, I've heard that come up in several conversations, but I haven't seen anybody present kind of a methodology to it and kind of how it would work. I think that's something for a longer term fix in the bottle bill. For tiered payments that you're thinking about, how would that incentivize the opening of recycling centers in underserved areas or support rural areas?
Well, from what I understand, it's the single biggest limitation or the single biggest thing driving the closing of the centers is that their operating costs aren't the same, but the processing payments are the same. So I'm not as much of an expert on the bottle bill as you are, Jeff, but
There it is.
from what I understand, that is probably the single largest contributing factor to center closures.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a fix with the formula. I think the letter as we presented it does have somewhat of a tiered processing structure because it's allowing handling fees to recycling centers not on dealer sites in the underserved and rural areas, so that will help them. It would also allow the director to authorize higher processing payments to recycling centers in the underserved and rural areas. So I think that would be a quicker mechanism until the bigger fix of the bottle bill, addressing the formula, addressing the cost structure for the lower volume sites that are being hurt by the higher volume sites. So I think what we've put in the letter would allow a quicker response for the director to incentivize and support recycling centers in the underserved and rural areas. So get money out quicker, because going to a tiered structure, changing the formula, I'll be the first to admit that's going to take some time and a lot of turning the crank to really do the calculations on making sure that it would be a good, fair, and equitable solution, because like you indicated, the state is so diverse, but it's been a one-size-fits-all for processing payments, which has been very difficult to overcome. So I like the idea of tiered processing payments. I'd like to see that in a little more detail, but I think with what we have in the letter, it'll get the money out quicker and incentivize opening of redemption centers in the underserved and rural areas sooner. Kind of a quicker mechanism.
Okay, we've got a couple.
I would like to see it added, and I know it was in the AB 54 report as well. Heidi, just so you know, we were planning on having a conversation about this at the recycling committee, but it was not agendized, so we weren't able to. So this is actually the first time since the last meeting that any of us have talked about it.
Okay.
So that's why we're kind of getting in the weeds a little bit.
Okay, and when we first talked about this at the commission meeting, at the last meeting, this wasn't raised, correct? Because we are
I emailed Jeff about it after the meeting.
after the meeting, so we didn't discuss it at the meeting, and so
Right.
we're on second reading. So if we change it, we'd need to wait again for 2 weeks, and we'd have to write it. Is there any proposed language you have?
We could get something together this morning, probably, or at the very least later today. And again, I'm sorry, I should have raised this at the last meeting. It took me a while to check in with Mark. And so I apologize, it's on me.
Because this is an urgent letter. This is actually as far out as people wanted to go on this. So I'm not saying it's a bad idea. It's just it's late to be for the urgency of the letter, I think. But let's hear other commissioners have some thoughts. I know Commissioner Valle.
No, I agree with Nick. It would be nice to have that conversation, but we should have it at the recycling committee. There's a lot of other items that popped into my head about those small rural centers, transportation, getting the commodity to the processor. A lot of those centers don't have the capacity to do baling or even sorting because they're in small quantities. So transportation is a huge issue. That's something else I think that we need to talk through, Nick, that I'd like to add to that, but I think that we should go with the letter as is. I wouldn't want to delay it any further, but I want to continue the conversation at the committee level on a lot of other fronts.
Thank you. And then Commissioner Ward.
Yeah, of course, this is a great concern to me because right now all the facilities in Humboldt are closed and all the people from Humboldt are driving 2 hours north to come to North County and to redeem their bottles, which is a dire situation and of great concern to us. But I'm a bit honestly flummoxed by the complexity of the bottle bill, and unless you're in the middle of it, it's hard to know exactly what to tweak. So I generally support saying urgent action is required, but honestly, I don't feel like I have enough familiarity, even being a professional in the field, with the bottle bill details to know exactly what levers to push.
I think that gets to my point has always been it's actually too complicated. If experts in the field at this level can't even figure it out, we've got a problem. It's too hard to understand. If you move this, what does it do to that? But that's a bigger issue of simplifying the whole thing. And then Commissioner Davis and Commissioner Schneider.
Yeah, Jeff, in the last meeting I had asked if you could put a footnote on the reference to the sales tax revenue. And I didn't see the updated letters. Is there a footnote? And then second question, I did see that the table, the report and the table was posted. And but there's no, you have to do a calculation, right? This estimate of the $100 million of sales tax is based on a calculation. And I just think that sentence, the way it's written, is confusing. Because it refers to a table, and by the way, the table is actually on page 5. It's page 7 of the PDF, but it's page 5 of the report. But you have to basically multiply a number by another number to get there. And, you know, since we're trying to inform people, it seems like maybe that calculation should be spelled out rather than send them to a table and ask them to find the right numbers and do a calculation.
Commissioner Dunleavy, I mean, we talked about this. I think we were trying to figure out what's the best way to cite this in the data. And that was the discussion, is that it's a calculation. It's not clear. So shouldn't we just put the calculation in the report or in the letter?
I mean, the calculation's 1.3 billion in revenue that was referenced, whether it's page 7 or Commissioner Davis, you're saying page 5?
It's actually page 5 of the report. It's page 7 of the PDF.
Okay. So page 5. So 1.3 billion approximately is the revenue coming into the program, and that has the sales tax applied to it at the state and local sales tax rates. So if we say 7.75%, that comes out to over 100 million in sales tax revenue.
Yeah, actually the state rate is 6%. The 175 is local government.
Okay.
So it's 6% times 1.323898. It just would be, to me, it'd be easier to do the calculation rather than send somebody to a table, have them look up the correct sales tax rate and do the calculation. And it looks like it's less than the 100 million if you use the state rate.
Can we agree to just do the calculation, Jeff, in there, and then that would address it, and just put it in the letter, because that's not really changing the letter. It's just simply clarifying that data point in the math.
Yeah.
Okay.
And use the state sales tax for the state general fund, which is 6%.
We agreed on that, so we'll add that in with the state sales tax into the letter. Okay, because that doesn't, again, change the letter context or what we're seeing in it. Thank you. Commissioner Davis, was there anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Commissioner Schneider?
Just in the intent of emergency, I was at an event 2 weeks ago with Assemblyman Phil Ting and mentioned the work of this commission and the need for redemption centers. And he said, I was the first person who has gone to him and said that we actually need more buyback centers, that all he hears is removing them. He's San Francisco and a portion of San Mateo County. So the longer we wait on this letter, the more they will have that impression that there is no emergency. So I support getting it out now. If it isn't everything it should be, there can always be a second letter.
Yeah, good point. And then there's public comments. So why don't we have, there's 5 public comments on this item. We can read those into the record.
So the first one is from Liza Tucker. Concerning a letter from the Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling to the legislature, Consumer Watchdog supports the efforts to reopen closed redemption centers and to create new redemption opportunities in rural and underserved areas. Second one's from Richard Murphy at Murphy's Market. Agenda item 4, we need your help. In Humboldt County, residents have no viable CRV redemption options. The pandemic has crippled our CRV infrastructure, and we need recertification of our local recycling centers to get through this crisis. This would require allowing temporary appointment-based redemption. Please help. The next one is from Kareem Ameri. I strongly recommend an increase in processing payments to underserved and high-cost areas such as the Bay Area and Central California. In addition to allotting money per fiscal year in the budget for underserved areas, an additional layer of financial support would be called 4 to offset high costs and encourage recycling centers to serve those populations that currently have a limited access to CRV redemption centers. I further recommend recycling facilities be allowed to close temporarily with prior notice for valid reasons such as inclement weather, emergencies, remodeling, construction, COVID exposure, etc. There are a host of valid reasons that may necessitate a temporary closure that may last a day or more. The next one is from David Slagle at Hambro Recycling. Hambro Recycling is operating a successful recycling center in rural Northwest California. Please consider the following issues to address the recycling crisis in rural California. Provide processing fees for aluminum products when scrap value falls below a baseline level based on an established market index. Provide matching funding to open centers in underserved areas and to enhance the economic viability of such endeavors. Allow handling fees for all centers in underserved areas, whether on dealer sites, dual certified, or paying scrap incentive. Encourage and incentivize grocers to establish relationships with recycling centers and or processors. Allow the director to authorize the amending of operating hours and locations for specific reasons to accommodate fluctuations in CRV operations due to significant events affecting local communities. Allow the director to review and amend minor burdensome policies affecting rural communities. With reasonable modifications, we would be encouraged to expand operations.
Is this 150? I mean, we try to keep it to 150 words so we get through them all. And it's basically supportive of the letter, correct?
Yep, that's 146 words.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks. Correct, thanks. Ben, thanks, Ben.
The very last one is from Ralph Alcantar Jr. As overall environmental issues continue to become a much greater priority, the current recycling center infrastructure, a positive contribution to help offset some of these recycling challenges, has dramatically deteriorated over the past few years and resulted in a number of site closures. The recommendations established by the statewide commission provide additional support to both struggling and marginal recycling centers and develop new opportunities for underserved areas. Another consideration, similar to a franchise model, would be limitations to the number of recycling center certifications issued in a specific region to prevent oversaturation of a specific area, creating further recycling center challenges. Californians need their CRV deposits back more than ever during this pandemic crisis and the long recovery ahead. The recycling centers play a fundamental role in both positive environmental and economic impacts. That's all the comments.
Well done. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Commissioner Ward?
Yes, I've been trying to adjust item number 6 in the letter and the language, so I'd like to read a suggestion I have for that. It's not a big change, but allow the director of Cal Recycle to authorize flexibility in service hours and or increase in processing payments and handling fees to recycling centers in specific rural and underserved regions by up to 35% higher than statewide rates. So the changes are identifying regions, because then it's more than just rural areas, because I've heard there's also concerns about the cost in coastal areas. And then 35% is a little bit higher than 25% and adds flexibility. And then we're also mentioning handling fees and flexibility. Would that trigger another 2-week delay if we make that change?
Not if we change our policy. So when we created our policy, it was regarding the actual policies that we were sending to the legislature and what we thought was the report. We did not contemplate a urgency letter. And I think this raises the issue to me that we should be able to tweak this letter slightly. We're trying to be as transparent as possible, but this is not, I don't think, a huge tweak, and it is an urgent letter. So maybe we could go back and I could put on the agenda for next commission meeting that we actually change our policy that when it comes to urgency letters, there is not a 2-reading. We'll still try, because I think we've talked, and Commissioner Segura reminds us repeatedly to make sure we're being as transparent, we're giving people time to follow us. But it's up to you all. If you think that tweak to me seems small enough and important enough that we could do it. And I'll remind people that we really can't put language in the chats and stuff.
It was just the language I read out so that everybody would have a chance.
We can show your screen, and that way the whole world can see it.
Happy to do that if you'd like.
Please, I think that would be.
Okay.
And then Commissioner Davis, did you want to comment on this motion as offered?
Well, I just thought if we're going to amend the document, it might be good to have it up on the screen.
Yeah.
Oh, I can pull up the whole thing. Okay.
Yeah.
There it is.
You aren't seeing that.
Can you see that now?
Yeah. It's small. It's very hard for people to see.
Oh, I could fix that. All right. Let's
Much better, thank you. Okay. So do you want to track it or put the change?
So there's item 6 that as it currently stands, and the additional language I wanted to add is there.
Okay. So are you proposing to add a number or just?
No, I'm proposing that 7 replaces 6.
Okay, so we'll look at 7 versus 6. So the big change is 35% higher rate
And
instead of 45.
Flexibility in service hours,
Mhm.
and additional mention of handling fees. And then rather than saying areas, saying regions, that will allow the director to define the regions where those adjustments.
Okay, why don't we hold that there for a second and let people look at that and make comments on that? So Commissioner Davis and then Commissioner Medrano, please.
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Done. Okay, Commissioner Medrano?
You think you skip Commissioner Dunleavy and Sky?
Did I? It's so hard to see this little thing. Oh, gotcha. Commissioner Dunleavy?
Yes, thank you. For the sake of time, while we have the letter up to address Commissioner Davis's issue, I don't think it would change the letter if we just deleted the sentence that references the 100 million in sales tax. I think the governor and the legislature, they understand that number, so we don't need to point it out again. So I think if we just deleted that sentence, it doesn't change the letter.
That starts with the CRV.
Correct.
It's at the last sentence. If you stop scrolling there, I think it's the top.
CRD, yeah, delete the sentence that says the CRV deposits also contribute over 100 million.
We could just that whole sentence?
Yes.
Yeah.
Delete it?
Yep.
Okay.
Additional information, and if it's not needed.
And then based on one of the comments, item 3B, dual certified facilities not being eligible, I'd like to see if we could remove that, because there are some dual certified facilities up in the rural areas that have closed recently, and I wouldn't want to prevent them from reopening and not getting the additional payments that we're recommending, because it would help those facilities reopen, whether they're a processor curbside program or at a transfer station operating collection program. So I think if we remove 3B, that would help open up a few more recycling centers in the rural areas.
Any objections? Okay.
Trust that everybody knows that to be true and make sure there's unintended consequences. I just want to make sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, my comment is, why was it no before, and then we're switching it? What was the thought process before? I just don't recall right now.
The thought process to include it before is dual certified facility.
It was to not include it, right? And now we're saying that they are included.
Yes. Include them.
Right. So my comment's more, why did we have them not included before and now we want to? I just want to, if anyone out there remembers why that was a bullet point. I just don't remember.
The thought in prior was the dual certified facilities had other sources of income coming in from the program, and the focus was just on recycling centers kind of standalone recycling centers. But then thinking about it more, there were recycling centers that closed that were dual certified, and they closed the recycling centers because the program just didn't pay enough. So by removing that, I think more recycling centers will open up at the transfer stations or the material recovery facilities that are dual certified. It'll add a benefit to those programs to reopen their redemption centers.
Have you, just because you brought this up right now, Jeff, have we talked to anybody else about this to make sure that this is the intended outcome? And there's no unintended consequences of, it's just kind of at the last.
I think that's in response to one of the comments that came through from David Sligg from Hambro.
Okay. All right, well, does anybody else want to speak to this specific item? And then we can go to Kobe. John, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, just an editorial. If we're going to modify that, if you can go back up, you probably want to do away with A and just create a second sentence or incorporate it. Just format it.
So allow the director to authorize handling fee payments to new and existing recycling centers not on dealer sites in underserved rural areas. Recycling
period. Yeah, period, and then eliminate A.
Yeah, there's no need to have an A and a B because there's no B.
That work? Okay.
Are you good?
Okay, thanks. And then we'll move on to Commissioner Sky.
Thanks. I was just going to talk about the process, and I think that we have a good policy to have any kind of a recommendation that we're sending to the legislature read twice. But I don't know that we were specific in saying that any amendments would then have to be read twice again. And I know that's been our practice for the report. We may or may not want to continue that practice, but it ties our hands. The whole point of having an item read a second time is if we need to make final edits that we're able to do that. So I recommend we just clarify that I don't think that's inconsistent with the policy that we adopted. And so if there wasn't already a motion, I'd like to move that we finalize this letter with the amendments that have been discussed and approve it for you to send.
Good point. Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we've got, I just want to make sure everybody's had a chance to speak. There's 2 public comments still on this. So basically, we removed 3B, and we have removed the language regarding the taxes and that 100 million, and we've slightly changed the language to be more inclusive. So we're, instead of 6, we're doing the 7, and we're going to replace 6 with 7, and now there it is. So that's the final. Are there any other, well, let's read the 2 public comments, and then if there's any other comments or questions by commissioners, we'll take them after the public comments, and then we'll go to on the motion.
The first is from Kia Villarreal. It says, please don't extend the additions or revisions process. Urgency and approval of a letter is the most important. This doesn't add in time for governor or director acting on this. Thank you for your help in conversation. And the second one is from Humanos Tres. It says, this letter is requesting the governor give authority and funds to help with action from the director of CalRecycle. The director and her staff should have the ability to make changes as needed, not needing to be explicitly listed in the letter. Urgency is of the utmost importance. Yes, there can always be a second letter.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any other commissioners that wish to speak on this letter, or is it, because if not, then we'll consider it final. We'll take up Commissioner Sky's motion to approve this letter as is with the amendments we just made live, which everyone can see.
And Heidi, I mean, the only comment, I know we made the last thing of including the dual source facilities. I just want to make sure it's, and not to change the letter, so I'm not making, I think we do go forward with the letter. It's just that we as a commission, if somehow it's determined that by doing that, it then sends funds not to the places that actually need the help, then, I want to make sure that that is not what occurs, right? We're trying to, provide funding for facilities that are either need to come online or need funding to stay open, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to make sure that that doesn't change anything in terms of what funding who gets, right? All of a sudden, that facility in a very rural area that was supposed to get funding now does not. And so I just want to make sure that we just keep that as if that happens, just keep an eye on that.
Excellent point. And I think we did state in the beginning about the intent of doing this letter. So we could certainly go back to that if there were an unintended consequence of this change, since we are doing it a bit on the fly. So,
and that's what we added with item 8, not to negatively impact existing programs, curbside programs, collection programs, not to take away anything from those programs. This is strictly focused on redemption centers to provide additional assistance to them. And I think one of the last comments and the greatest goal or intent of this letter is giving Director Wagner the ability to make some decisions and provide funding for her to help open up recycling centers and redemption locations in these underserved and rural areas. I think this would be a great first step to get more recycling centers open until a big fix in the bottle bill to address formulas and things like that can get done.
okay, so with that, I'm going to assume we have no other comments from the public. I haven't seen any other asterisks in the chat. So if everybody would vote on Commissioner Sky's motion, is there a second on that motion?
Commissioner Ward had seconded it.
Oh, that's right. Commissioner Ward seconded. So everybody's okay? Thumbs up. Is there anybody? There we go. Thumbs up. And we got Commissioner Gallo. Great.
I'm sorry. I don't think I'm comfortable supporting it at this point.
Okay, so now's the time to air your concerns.
Well, I did earlier. It just hasn't been addressed.
Okay, so you would rather not send a letter than...
I would rather we add the tiered processing payments either at this meeting or, come back in 2 weeks with that language.
Okay.
We do have tiered processing payments in that it's authorizing up to 35% higher in the underserved and rural areas.
Right, which is along the same lines, but a little different than what had been proposed in the AB 54 report and in previous legislation.
Yeah, with the AB 54 report, my understanding is they recommended eliminating handling fees and going to a one payment fee structure along with the tiers. A very complex recommendation that they made, and that's something that I hope CalRecycle or somebody would present how such a system would work, because that really gets into the atoms of the program. Because if you're going to eliminate handling fee payments and go to a one container payment, that's going to affect curbside programs, and it will eliminate all additional handling fees for convenience zone sites throughout the state. That was a very big recommendation that they made that will affect recycling centers everywhere. And
yeah, but that's separate from the recommendation on the tiers, right?
Can I make a suggestion, because we cut our meetings to 2 hours. We've got presenters waiting, and this is really the frustration I think with a lot of us with the bottle bill, is it just the complications of it are so deep that it's very hard to move on anything, and we've got people who are really needing of help right now. So it's unfortunate this didn't get brought up at the last commission meeting, because we could have resolved it between now and the last meeting. I guess, I mean, Commissioner Lapis, so do you want to you're going to vote no on this item? And then do you want? Okay.
Yeah, I would vote no if the rest of the group wants to move forward. I think that that's fine. And I wish we had been able to talk about it in the committee. It's just that we weren't able to discuss it, and then we as a group weren't able to discuss it because of Bagley-Keene.
Right. Those are the limitations that we have by the law. It's just very hard on all of us because we do wish we could talk more. And I would say Commissioner Davis has an idea.
Yeah, I heard Commissioner Lapis said he might be supportive if we address tiered payments at a subsequent meeting. Could we add just at the close, add a comment that we intend to address tiered payments and will update this letter accordingly? Something along that line. Is that in line with what you're thinking, Mr. Lapis?
I mean, I think for sake of simplicity, we could add a one line, allow tiered processing payments. I don't think it has to be overly complicated. I think we would wordsmith your one sentence more than we would wordsmith the actual recommendation.
Well, this is where the problem gets into how many details that we're trying to give an overview and advice, and we're trying to give authority to CalRecycle to do things quicker and faster that address this immediate problem. So are we saying we want the tiered things changed, or are we going to give authority to the CalRecycle leadership to get into the weeds on a how?
Adding a line suggesting tiered payments in this letter, I don't think would be appropriate. I think it would only confuse things and potentially delay anything from happening.
So again, I feel like I'm the fly in the ointment, but we think this is the single most important thing, and having a list of 8 recommendations that doesn't include this would not have the desired effect. That's been our organizational policy for several years now.
Okay, well,
so I can be a no vote. This can be something we did not reach consensus on. That's okay, or we could do some variation of what Ted is working on.
But Nick, I think it has been, the commission has done, I think, a wonderful job gaining consensus. And so then the recommendations, I think, have, then are thought of as having a full support. And, for me, it's important that we continue with that kind of policy, that we reach consensus if we can. So that's just a comment. I mean, because then it turns into a majority vote, and I don't know if that's what we intended, right?
Well, but the other problem is this is urgent. This isn't like most of the policies. We've got a crisis on our hands, and people are telling us every single meeting they're dying out there. They need help now. And this is the one thing the commission can do. I see Commissioner Ward's head nodding because he's in the middle of the rural area that's most affected, it seems, right now. So I'm not comfortable kicking this can down the road. I really wish this would have been brought up earlier, and we can certainly modify it and have a discussion at the recycling commission meeting. And I see, if you could see in the chat, let's see, Commissioner Davis already spoke. I think Commissioner Sky, you want to say something?
Just to see if we can find consensus, because it is very important for our commission. Could we modify the language in item 6 so that when we talk about flexibility in service hours, increases in processing payments or handling fees, this is in the number 6, we just add as well as tiered payments.
But with tiered payments, that gets into curbside program, so that expands what we're looking at here, and it would have statewide implications.
I agree, but we're saying this is a recommendation to allow CalRecycle to have the flexibility. They would be going through a process to discuss changes.
Alex, can you read, please?
What if we took Kobe's language and put a period after payments and just got rid of the rest of that sentence and just allow for flexibility?
but the letter does allow flexibility for the director to pay up to 35% higher processing payments in the underserved and rural areas.
Which is similar, but not exactly our proposal. I mean, as you pointed out, Jeff, it's more complicated than that.
So with this, just to clarify, Nick, so this tiered payments language would allow the curbside programs to get more money as well? I'm lost.
Commissioner Ward, would you zoom into the language too, just so that folks watching it can read a little better?
I don't want to misspeak because I'm not actually 100% sure how it affects the curbside programs. I know the thinking was to increase payments for the recycling centers that have lower costs or higher costs of operating. I am not 100% sure how it affects curbside programs.
Well, I guess I'm concerned if we're not sure exactly the impacts of this change. I'm getting nervous to change it at the last minute, but I don't want to hold this up either. For the parts
I think that the beauty of adding it to 6 though is that it allows the director flexibility to do it, which
so they don't have to.
isn't spelling it out, but it's basically, I think that's a good compromise. I think we had wanted to spell it out in legislation, but this is a good compromise to keep the concept alive and move the letter forward.
And my intent,
Go
do
ahead,
we
Chris.
just change the language?
Yeah, what's the final, if we were to do
Hello.
that,
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
what happened?
I think we lost some of the wording there.
I just want to, this is exactly why we try to get the language early or have people submit proposed language and so forth, because it's really hard to do on the fly with 17 people.
So do you, I deleted the details on the payments just to make it generally payments, so it could be handling fees or processing fees. Want the specifics back in?
What are you asking?
I think that is what
If we
what Nick is saying, and he would feel comfortable then if the language was in the way he specified, then he would feel comfortable then reaching consensus. And I think, Commissioner Sky, by making those, adding it there would then create a situation we can move forward with this letter. I believe that's what both Commissioner Sky and Commissioner Lapis, if that language is included, then we're there.
So it would read, allow the director of Cal Recycle to authorize flexibility in service hours and or increases to processing and handling payments to recycling centers in specific rural and underserved regions by up to 35% higher than statewide rates. But that doesn't say tiered.
Want
My
tiered?
recommendation is put a period after payments, delete the rest, and I think that captures, and it's very similar to what was in there before, but it captures the general concept, and I think there's a consensus there if I'm correct.
Wait a minute. So that would
No,
that it's going to
35% though.
I don't agree with deleting the
Okay, never mind.
specificity of rural recycling centers and underserved regions. I disagree.
That's key. Yeah.
Okay, so what if we stuck with Ted's comment below? The commission has interest and support for tiered processing payment structure, but was able to find the details of such recommendation in an adequately timely manner. Can we just stick with that? Or
If I could jump in here, I would ask that we delete that. And Commissioner Lapis, if you want time, get the recycling committee to present a tiered structure that we could review and then bring back to the commission and include in the final report in July. I think that would be appropriate because, like I mentioned before, I've heard tiered processing payments before, but I've yet to see an example of it. So rather than slow this letter down with a vague concept like that, I would ask that we pull that from this letter, and then I'll schedule time for tiered processing payments at the recycling committee to be heard, and then we could take that through the entire process through the commission and add to the final report in June.
I agree. I think the simpler wording now in 6 that has increases to processing and handling payments, that could include a tiered structure for those payments.
Yeah. Certainly doesn't preclude it. And the public is seeing this discussion. It's not like people don't know that we're having it. And it will be, I'll make sure it's laid out in the notes that we had this healthy discussion around tiered payments and where we leave it. So Commissioner Lapis, would you support this now, the number 6, the way it is, possibly under a tiered structure?
Yeah, I mean, for sake of consensus, I think that I'm okay with it.
Okay, great. So
and I apologize for derailing the conversation a little bit.
It's okay. I think it's just a good reminder for all of us that when we're having these, especially when we're going into second reading, to really make sure you've read it very carefully and you've got all your comments in. And if you do want to change something, that's fine. But you can email Ted and I proposed language changes, and then we can upload it to the Google Docs or send it out to all the commissioners so that everybody can read it and think about it before the meeting. It's just very hard for us to go through all the unintended consequences in our head this short order, and we don't want to miss something that causes issues, I think is why everybody was hesitating a little bit. So with those changes, I think we have 17-0 agreement and get back to consensus once again, which makes everybody happy, right? Excellent. And so Commissioner Dunleavy, you're going to bring this up at the next recycling committee meeting so that we get this discussion on tiered rates on the next agenda, correct? You've committed to that?
We'll have it on a future agenda. Let me see what's scheduled for the next meeting coming up. So it will be on a future agenda.
It's clearly important to Commissioner Lapis, so I just really want to make sure we don't put that off too far.
Yep.
And Chairperson Sanford, thank you as a chairperson for allowing the discussion to continue to get to consensus. I believe that's an extremely important item on this commission that allows everybody to have a voice. And if we don't do that, then it changes the dynamic. So I truly appreciate you allowing for that.
No, I totally agree, and I always feel a lot better when we all agree as well. I'm always proud of everybody getting to 17-0. So let's keep striving for that every time for sure. Thank you all so much. So that is done. I would just say then that what we do with this letter is we will, Commissioner Ward, you have the final, I believe. So you can finish it, PDF it, and then if you'd like, I can send it to Director Wagner and then over to the committee chairs and the environmental committee, so forth, staff over at the legislature. Is that where you'd like it to go? Commissioner Dunleavy, those are really the key people that would want to see this, I believe. So I've got their email addresses from the report, so I'll go ahead and send this out today on behalf of the commission.
Can we include CSAC and the League of California Cities, please?
Oh, and RCRC as well. Thank you for the reminder. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I will do that immediately after the meeting, and I see Commissioner Schneider has a comment.
I understand sending it to the committees that work on this, but I wonder then if this is important enough that every assemblyman and every senator should see it too by way of their staff. If you've got, for example, Assemblyman Ting, who's not aware of this problem, but carries a lot of recycling legislature, and he's not aware of this, he's not seeing the full picture of what's happening in the recycling world. So I know it's a little bit more work, but a letter sent to every assemblyman, every senator would be my recommendation.
I will ask that. I need help. It took me hours to send this report out and get the email addresses. This is not easy. It's not just a hit send.
Okay.
So
what do you need help with? And offline, I'll help you with it.
Okay, great. I need a total list of, and if somebody here on the commission has a list of every legislator's email address and all their committee consultants, I've got part of it. but not the whole one. And then
That
that
wasn't where you were doing all the work. That's right. We are totally, almost totally staffless.
Right.
We should address that.
Yes, well, that has been the ongoing issue, is the amount of time this is all taking. So we've got to move on because we've got presenters waiting. So
Yeah. Commissioner Sanborn, thank you for your assistance. Commissioner Schneider, thank you for offering help. I am also available to help because hopefully something will get introduced by February 19th. I would hate to see this miss that date, and we're subject to a gut and amend, a last minute Hail Mary process.
It'll go out today for sure to the majority of folks. We might miss a few, but we'll catch them on the backside. So I will work with Commissioner Schneider on getting a list together that's for everybody that we just keep, and then that way I can get it into a group on my email, and that's just the ongoing group. All right, so we got to move on. Thank you so much for a great discussion once again. I'm so proud of this commission. So we'll move on. We've got the letter done. That'll go out today for agenda item number 5, and I want to thank all the public too for their input on that item. We are now going to get into a presentation and discussion around what was initially listed as chemical recycling. Now, the preferred term by at least folks from the Chemistry Council is advanced recycling. And this has also been an issue that's been brought to our attention from the very beginning. We chose not to hear it in the last 6 months and bring it to this 6 months of the year before our final report is due, because we asked CalRecycle, if you recall, they gave us a presentation on what is the definition of chemical recycling. They said clearly there is no definition in law, that they have a 3-part test that all technologies have to pass in order to be considered recycling technology. We are tasked with increasing recycling rates and defining recyclable, but not changing the definition or that 3-part test. So we had asked all of the manufacturers to please independently, if they wanted to get in front of the commission and they wanted to have a discussion about their technology, since this rubric includes multiple technology types, is to send us a specific bit of information about their technology, why they believe it meets the 3-part test, and then we would have a scheduling of a discussion about that, whether it should be a market development committee item or a full commission item. We have not received one letter that meets those criteria, not one. We get a lot of big emails with a lot of asks and us to have in doctors and PhDs and everything else. So I do want to get real quickly before we turn it over to John. I posted this email. There was a request by Daniel Velasquez at AnyRep, and he asked some questions that I don't think he's alone. So I just want to answer these real quickly and let the commissioners weigh in, and then we'll get to John's presentation. And John Timbers is with AMSTI. His presentation has been posted on the Google Doc. He sent it yesterday, and he will be presenting on their behalf. He represents A Technology, and ACC deferred to him on their time. So his first question from Daniel was to allow input by means of presentations, opinions of other involved stakeholders, scientists, professors, MRF, recycling operators, CEOs, CFOs, ONGs before the commission. And my response, and please clarify, other commissioners, anybody can present to us, anybody can ask to present to us. But what we asked on this particular type of technology is for you to provide us with specifics of how it meets the 3-part test. We have not received any. So that's what we're waiting for. But anybody can submit comments in the portal. I was glad to see there was a bunch this morning on this topic. So please continue with that, or send certain technology meets this 3-part test. Question number 2, set up workshops for better understanding about advanced recycling, inputs, outputs, etc. I don't believe the commission, and tell me if I'm wrong, commissioners, that you wanted to have separate entire workshops on this if it didn't meet the 3-part test. We've talked about this many times. Again, please send us something that shows us how you meet the 3-part test. The third question, include tire waste as part of the feedstock for advanced recycling. You tell us what your technology is and what the feedstock is. We don't care. We just want to get some technologies that meet the 3-part test, then we'll have the discussion. Number 4, Review the proposal for EPR policies, investment in education, separation, sorting, collection. EPR funds for better pre-treatment can help detonate the struggling recycling industry. We talk about EPR all the time, so that's not a problem. 5 is address the Basel Convention plastic restrictions along with the topic of advanced recycling. We've already submitted, and there's already AJR 4, which is in the legislature now, which just got referred to the Assembly Natural Resources Committee, as far as I know today, to be heard early March, based on our recommendation from this commission about the Basel Convention. The reason I wanted to read this out loud was this was CC'd to many, many people, and it wasn't to all the commissioners, and so I want to make sure that all the public knows, and I might sound like a broken record, but we need specifics about the technology. There is not one technology under this umbrella, and we are not going to continue to go round and round and round until we see how the technologies meet the 3-part test. And if commissioners have a different opinion of that, let me know, and I will say, looks like Commissioner Sky, you wanted to say something.
Just briefly, I know that we discussed the 3-part test, but I want to make sure we're not putting too much weight to it, because the truth is there was discussion by some of the responses about the 3-part test and how they might meet it. But more importantly, I don't know that CalRecycle is applying this 3-part test to any facility in the state of California. And I would hazard to guess that if they did, that a lot of facilities that are currently considered MRSA recycling facilities would not be able to meet it. So we should have a conversation about that, and that was the intent of the discussions. And I would like to have, we've already lost more than a third of the time that was allocated to this item. So we should definitely have additional presentations on this topic, because it's not a simple topic.
Yes, just like the bottle bill. Okay, well, we'll move on to John to make the presentation, and we can talk more after. So welcome, Mr. Timbers. Good to see you again. And just so you all know, Mr. Timbers, I met, actually, he came on our trip to with the California Foundation for the Environment and the Economy. The first year we took the trip with legislators. And so I've known John for a few years. And Tim Shestek asked that he give the presentation on behalf of his company today. So go ahead, John.
A quick technology check. You can see my screen, a blue slide, and you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Heidi, thank you. I really appreciate the invitation. I appreciate Tim Shestek deferring his time to me. I can see we need to be efficient here, so I'm just going to jump right in. Advanced recycling, I myself struggle with the word, right? Internally we call it circular recycling. I apologize if I go back and forth between advanced recycling and circular recycling today. This commission is chartered to look at end markets for recyclables. I think of advanced recycling technologies, and like Heidi said, this is a range of technologies, but really pathways. There are, in our economy, there are existing established markets that are large, have a big demand, have a lot of value, and if we could innovate pathways for post-consumer plastics back into those markets, that would really be a huge win for the recycling system. And I see the advanced recycling technologies as pathways that in their best state will have the robustness to be able to take a more contaminated post-consumer stream from a MRF, more resilient to contamination, organic contamination, and do a better job of purifying those materials than existing technologies to create pathways into known markets with high performance requirements, automotive, medical, building construction, etc. So I'm going to try to do this quickly, 15 minutes, an introduction to me, an introduction to AmSty, an introduction to the technologies we are investing in, and then I'll allow time for Q&As as part of the agenda.
Gaia presentation, and then we'll do Q&A for both of you, because unfortunately our item beforehand took a little bit of time. So we're going to have to hopefully get it to 10 minutes if we can, John. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be quick here and then follow Heidi's guidance on Q&A. The next slide, I really just want the group to know who they're talking to. On the left is a picture made in 1986. Fourth grade. I share that because that's actually the first time I heard of recycling. Fourth grade teacher who told us the town had a new bin for recycling your newspapers, and how the waste from our society was accumulating, and it went in landfills, and the landfills were filling up, and we had to start recycling. And it really motivated me. I had a long bus ride home that day, thought about it, got home, told my dad, hey, we need to start taking our newspapers to the recycling bin behind the grocery store. My dad thought that was ridiculous. We lived 11 miles outside of town. No way he was going to drive those newspapers to 11 miles to recycle them. I guess this is my first, I had to innovate in recycling there. We didn't have access. So we go to church every Sunday. That's in town. Why don't we take the newspapers on Sunday? And he said, okay. He agreed to that. So we started doing that. I'm in fourth grade. We started taking the newspapers to the recycling bin behind the grocery store, and it was next to the dumpster. And it was another lesson for me is as I dropped my small little stack of the Monroe Evening News newspapers in this bin, it was next to this overflowing dumpster, which was obviously a big problem, and with lots of stuff not being recycled. That kid there was on the left was a pretty good student, went to college, became a chemical engineer, fell in love with chemistry and chemical engineering, and landed as the guy on the left, the director of innovation at innovation and sustainability for AmSty, and still thinking about these recycling problems all along the way. As a engineer who focuses on these problems, I would now describe this as the plastics waste crisis. And it's really important, and now I'm also a father and strict enforcer of the 3 R's in the household. I think the last big fight I had with my teenage daughter was that she wanted to get water, and she wanted to supply the whole household with bottled water for all our drinking water needs. And I said, absolutely not. The last big fight I had with my daughter. This next slide on the left here, I think I love this slide, but I also hate this slide. I think this slide tells you a lot about the situation we're in, why we're in it, etc. So the top line shows you plastics production 1960 to 2018, and you see that line going up. So that's virgin plastics production. That line has continued to go up. We continue to find there are many markets where plastics are the best material for a given application: automotive, construction, medical. It just continues to be the high quality, low cost, durable material of choice in so many markets. So there's so many established, known, strong markets for the materials represented by that top line. The bottom line shows recycling 1960, plastics recycling 1960 to 2018. The first thing that jumps out here, the first part of the story this chart tells you is that they're different. The bottom line isn't enjoying the same amount of growth, clearly doesn't have the same demand in the markets, clearly doesn't have access to the same markets. And this gap has been exacerbated. This gap is really our plastic waste crisis in the United States. We have about a 32 million ton per year annual gap between virgin plastics production and the plastics recycling industry. The opportunity here is there's obviously some really strong markets there represented by that top line: automotive, medical, food service, food packaging. There are these markets exist. We don't have access into them for post-consumer plastics. And that's what this chart on the right is quantifying, is what is the demand for post-consumer plastics in the market by polymer type. And if you total up those blue bars for each polymer, that's a total of about 27 million tons a year of demand. The light blue line on the right chart shows what percent of that demand has been met by polymer type. So in PET, for example, about 19% of the demand for post-consumer PET was being met in 2018. But collectively, only about 6% of the demand for post-consumer plastics is being met. That unmet gap is about 25 million tons per year. So on the left, we have a gap of, what did I say, 32 million tons a year on the right.
We're pretty clear on the problem, I think.
Yes, demand.
Yeah.
So this is why companies like AmSty, AmSty is a pellet producer, right? We make plastic pellets and supply these markets. Looks at this and says, wow, this is where we should be investing. Let's invest in this. There's an opportunity to be successful here. There's an opportunity to meet an unmet demand in the market. I'm going to just 3 things about AmSty here, what we believe. When we started going on this journey, we said, okay, what are kind of our guideposts here? How are we going to decide which direction we go? The first statement for us is disposable products are needed. COVID's brought this to light for everyone in the world, right? We're really active right now in the polystyrene foam cooler container business is exploded with the shipment of the COVID vaccine. We're working on how we recycle all these foam coolers that are being used to ship the vaccine around the world. That's actually one of the cool things we're working on. But the COVID pandemic's brought that to everyone's forefront. But it's all the need for public health is always there. The next thing we establish is, well, but the recycling system is working. So these products are needed, but the recycling system is working. I think that's the work this commission is doing is centered right there. Is we need end markets, right? We need people, consumers, businesses that want to buy the products that come out of the recycling system, and that's really a struggle right now. And our view on that is that those markets exist, but the products coming out of the plastics recycling system are of lower quality. They don't meet the color requirements. They're not FDA approved, or they don't meet the UL rating, or something. Something is missing there. So that system has to be improved. That's where we think advanced recycling fits. That we can take those. I simplify a lot. Dirty to clean. A successful advanced recycling technology needs to take a dirtier feedstock than traditional recycling systems, and they need to produce a product that is cleaner than the traditional recycling systems. And that's what we're investing in. And I just simplify it inside AmSty. When I talk to people, I simplify it. If someone talks to me about a clean technology, I say, no, we're not interested. We're not investing in clean technologies. We're looking for technologies that have that can accept a dirtier feedstock in and put a clean, completely unaffected feedstock out. And we think this combination of consumer demand, innovation, innovations that have come along, and policies like you guys are thinking of, makes a future possible where all these products are infinitely recyclable. Okay. Sorry. So let's talk a little bit about the technology. I think I'm gonna start in a weird spot. I'm gonna start in the lower left quadrant as we go around this circle. Again, I told you we call our technology a circular recycling process because we're focused on going from polystyrene back to polystyrene. Some of these technologies focus on going from, say, mixed plastics to waxes, or polypropylene to polypropylene. We're focused on a circular technology. I'll start on the bottom left where it says International Sustainable Carbon Certification. Because this path around this circle that I'm showing is somewhat technical, one thing I think is really important for these technologies, and we see more and more of these companies, in the hundreds of companies that are in this space doing this, is to invite a third party in. This International Sustainable Carbon Certification is a chain of custody certification model. It actually has its genesis in other technologies, like palm oil and other technologies where there's a requirement for some minimum levels of say content, or ethanol and gasoline or something like that you have a third party come in and do a chain of custody certification that what you're bringing in is being processed the way you're saying, and what you're selling contains what you're saying it contains. So I think that my boss told me a little while ago, you should quit your job at AmSty and go start a mass mail certificate or chain of custody certification company, because this is going to be a huge trend, and I do think we're seeing more and more people go through that certification process. It's valuable. Top left. I think this is another important point for these technologies. It's a solution for hard to recycle plastics. You know, the picture there shows forks and spoons and plates and cups. I don't think that this technology is for all plastics. You know, the recycling systems that have good established markets, good established technologies, good pathways into those markets should you know, stay there with the most efficient process. Also, if you have clean streams, I don't think this is a technology that we should put clean post-consumer plastics into. I get this question a lot. I'm at a customer and they say, hey, John, I got this trim scrap or something. Could you take that? And I always reject that because I just don't think that this technology is not the right technology for clean streams that could go re-enter the market in a different way. And then I'm going to go to the top right, where although this technology is designed for those harder to recycle plastics that are typically have organic contamination from food, or they're small, or they have multi-layer films or things like that, that's what it's designed for. So a more robust to level residue in the feedstock, but it's still really important to have control on the feedstock. And this is one of the things that we're really into the science part of, is exactly what do the specifications need to be. And you wouldn't believe how much time we've spent on, if the product is 99.8% pure today, and our technology produces a product that's 99.7% pure, does that work? And when I first got into this discussion, I thought this is a ridiculous question, you know, 99.8 versus 99.7, but it turns out it matters. And it's really important that actually then that goes back to the feedstock quality. You can't take just anything and get to the 99.8% pure level for our particular technology. So feedstock quality is key. So to the question of sorting, you know, the technology we're practicing has a feedstock specification where the polystyrene coming in actually needs to be, and we're honestly sorting it out, trying to find, you know, the optimal spot. But right now we're shooting for 97% pure. Coming out of an optical sorter, you're kind of like 92% pure. So there's more work that has to be done between an optical sorter to the feedstock. The bottom right is also important. So oxygen exclusion is key. If you remember the old heat triangle, the fire triangle, you had if you have heat, you have fuel, and you have oxygen, you got a fire. Key to this technology is you do not want a fire. The way we achieve that is to exclude oxygen. The innovations in this technology, from my perspective, are in the heat flux control systems. You know, that's when I go to different technology providers that have developed different advanced recycling technologies, I'm really curious to see how people are managing the heat flux. Heat flux will, that's where I think a lot of the innovations are coming.
So basically you're talking about a styrene recycling system, polystyrene.
Yeah, our technology is completely around polystyrene back to the liquid styrene. Some of the other practitioners, I think Nexus has been one that's a mixed plastics to an naphtha type product. But for us, we're polystyrene to styrene, 99.8% pure styrene. So what have we done with all that? We, in 2019, invested in this recycling facility in Portland. Here's a picture of it. We call this Regenex. It's a joint venture. We own half of Regenex. Our technology provider, Agilix, owns the other half of Regenex. And we've been doing this for almost 2 years now. You know, the main learnings from us, I think, can be summarized by a public press release we put out in the fourth quarter of 2020, that we're going to have 25% recycled materials in all our food service, food packaging by 2030. And, you know, really inside what happened is we started Regenex. We're going down the pathway of improving these technologies and seeing what these technologies are capable, owning a facility that lets you learn a lot about what the potential were. And we said, wow, we think this is possible. So let's set our sails in the direction for 25% recycled content by 2030, and that's the mission we're on now. I just want to do that quick introduction. I know we're tight on time, so I will put my contact information up there, and I'll return the floor to the chair.
Great. Thank you so much. And I saw before you started, Commissioner Potashner had put an asterisk, and since he had done that before you started, I just want to give him opportunity to speak.
Yeah, I can do both. One was, I just wanted to respond to something that Commissioner Sky had said about MRFs and the three-part test. I just want to make sure we're not confusing things that, you know, if you are not meeting the three-part test, there's a permitting process to deal with that and get coverage under a solid waste facilities permit, which most MRFs, I imagine, are doing. So, hey, Jonathan, how you doing? Can you speak a little bit about, from a, I guess I would say, a tip fee perspective, what would, if it was allowed in California and these sites were set up, what would it look like to curbside programs in local MRFs? Are they marketing material to you for you to pay for, or is there a tip fee on the front end?
No, we would look to buy that. So in building these advanced recycling facilities, the model we're building this on is what I call the blended feedstock model. So there are sources of post-consumer polystyrene that come from commercial and industrial, warehouses that use, actually the COVID vaccine coolers would be a good example where we're not doing that curbside. That's a collection program, or warehouses that have, we're doing a foam, the EPS foam from refrigerators, for example, for when you get refrigerator delivery. So there's those types of sources. I'm going to call those commercial and industrial. Those are typically cheaper and easier to access. And then for both quality and cost and volume purposes, then those sources are blended with curbside sources. So say from your type of facility, and they're all densified, ground up, and create a feedstock from blending the two. So your question is around the curbside piece, and the economics of the two are important. Our model would be that we would buy those curbside bales from a MRF like Recology, not that you would pay us to take them. I think that answers your question.
And just to clarify, it would be a bale of polystyrene only, or you're taking a mixed plastic bale at that point?
A bale of polystyrene only would be our target, yes.
Commissioner Potashner, is that hard to do? Isn't that a lot more labor to sort and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology required to even try to pull that together would be pretty expensive. So I think for the market to work, you'd be paying a pretty high price, but that's down the road, I imagine.
Yeah, and we're at 10:24 with only 11 o'clock meeting, unfortunately. So I'm going to leave the questions that we've got there and move on to our next speaker, and then we can take all the questions at the end. And hopefully we have enough time. So Dr. Neil Tangri with Gaia, they wanted time as well to speak to this. So welcome, Dr. Tangri, and please take it away and get us to the point as you can, because we're running a little tight on time. I'm sorry for that.
Understood. Thank you. I am going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see my presentation. Do you all see that, the chemical recycling and the plastic problem?
You do. Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. Well, I will try to step through this quickly. I'm with Gaia. We're a global network of 800 organizations in 90 countries. I think most of you have heard of us, so I won't say more on that. But we've been hearing a lot about chemical recycling in recent years, and so we've been doing a deep research dive into these technologies. Or as champions of zero waste, and so we're always interested in new recycling technologies. I'm going to present the top level findings here, but you can find more on our website. So as you all know, at least as well as I do, we have a problem with plastic recycling. Most of what's collected is contaminated, unusable, or downcycled. The problem is primarily economics. Virgin plastic is extremely cheap. So industry is proposing to address this with chemical recycling. We just heard the presentation about chemical, or what ACC calls advanced recycling, or I guess they keep changing their terminology, whatever the marketers feel like sounds better. There's a Greenpeace report that came out recently that shows most of this touted investment isn't actually real. There isn't even a standard definition of what chemical recycling is, but we can describe it as a set of technologies that break plastic down into its components, usually into its monomer building blocks. So here we have PET, and the idea is to use a combination of heat, pressure, and in some cases solvents, exclude the oxygen to avoid combustion, and you get monomers. You also it's also critical to strip out the additives and the contaminants, which are a very high proportion of plastic. And this, of course, is part of what bedevils traditional mechanical recycling. So the core technology types that are used in chemical recycling are pyrolysis and gasification. Each company has a slightly different recipe with kind of how exactly they combine these, but this is a general schematic. These processes produce three outputs: a gas phase, a liquid phase, an oil, and a solid phase, a char. So to your original question, is this recycling? Let's look at the plastic life cycle, starting with oil and gas in the upper left-hand corner. And it goes through multiple production stages till it gets to those products on the right that we're all familiar with. And after use, the shortest loop to get those materials back into the economy is reuse. Obviously, that has the lowest environmental impacts and energy demands. Mechanical recycling, as you know, grinds, remelts the plastic, but doesn't change the basic polymer structure. Chemical recycling goes a step further, breaking the plastic down into monomers. It therefore has much higher energy demands. And in theory, this can be put back into plastic production. In practice, it's almost always burned as fuel. Now, plastic to fuel is obviously not recycling. It has none of the upstream benefits of recycling. And in the European Union, recycling specifically excludes plastic to fuel. But of course, in the US, there is no legal definition at the federal level. So industry is deliberately, particularly the ACC, is deliberately conflating recycling and plastic to fuel. And we think that these are very important distinctions to maintain. That raises the question, why burn these outputs instead of turning them back into plastic? Well, the primary reason, of course, is economic. Virgin plastic is simply too cheap to compete with. But there is also a contamination problem. As you know, plastic is full of additives and contaminants, and these, in fact, do come out in the pyrolysis oil and gas. The pyrolysis process also creates new contaminants. So dioxin, for example, is 4 times more concentrated in the output oil than it is in the plastic feedstock that goes in. And the hydrocarbon output is not pure monomer. It's a mix that's really not very suitable for plastic manufacture. So, for example, the Regenix facility that was cited earlier sends a lot of its output to cement kilns, which is a flag to us that this is, in fact, not on spec monomer, that this is hazardous waste that needs disposal. So where does that leave us in the big picture? Very little plastic actually becomes new plastic through this process. Obviously, plastic to fuel doesn't contribute to a circular economy. That's not making new plastic at all. Even if this process is used to produce new plastic, it's not really plastic because of the high energy demands and the large carbon losses at each stage of the process. So you can see that through the cracking, the depolymerization at the bottom of the screen, that's kind of the heart of the process. There's energy that goes in at each point, and then there's process losses. So the carbon dioxide emissions, I want to talk about this a little bit because we actually did analyze the regulatory data from the Regenix facility that you heard about. It's the only facility in the United States that actually has publicly available data. So that's what we analyzed. For every pound of plastic they produce, they're emitting 2.5 pounds of carbon dioxide in this stage alone, the pyrolysis or the depolymerization stage. They don't address the next stage, which is the upgrading and cleanup. So this is where the additives and contaminants are stripped out and the hydrocarbon mix is tweaked to allow for production of new plastic. We suspect that that's happening in Texas, not at the Oregon facility. Our academic contacts, publications tell us that the carbon emissions there are 40% of the input in that stage. So the net is that less than 25% of the plastic that goes in comes out as monomer that can be turned. In other words, like 25% of the polystyrene comes back out as styrene that could be turned into new polystyrene. And the rest of it is really lost to the environment as carbon dioxide. So when we talk about a circle, what we really are talking about is a rapidly shrinking spiral here. I will say that this post-processing step is really critical point, and it's one that industry likes to avoid talking about. So this helps to explain why of the 37 facilities that have been announced in the United States since 2000, most of them were in fact plastic to fuel, not plastic to plastic facilities. Only 3 of the 37 are in operation. None turn plastic into plastic on really a commercial scale. The Agilex facility, the Regenix facility is probably the largest, and I think it's around 10 tons per day. So with poor economic prospects, industry is trying to tilt the playing field in their favor. There's a state-by-state campaign led by the American Chemistry Council to change legislation and waste management policies to divert plastic from mechanical recycling to chemical recycling. Such legislation is already passed in 8 states. It's been introduced in 6 more. And they're at the federal level, they're also asking for $1 billion in handouts under the Federal Recover Act to subsidize chemical recycling operations. So again, the contrast with Europe is pretty stark here. In the European Union, recycling is legally defined and regulation is being aligned to create a low carbon circular economy. Meanwhile, of course, as you know, plastic production is growing astronomically, 3.5 to 4% per year, and this is where most of the greenhouse gas impacts are. So this is really where we need to pay attention if we're going to get solutions to the plastic problem. So just to summarize, chemical recycling does not address the primary problems here. It doesn't avoid the need to sort waste, plastic waste. The technology is really not mature despite being in development for decades. It has very high energy demands. It has a high carbon footprint. The byproducts are low quality. The products, I should say, are low quality and require extensive cleanup. The byproducts are heavily contaminated. And ultimately, it's more expensive than virgin and mechanical recycling, so it can't compete in the market. And that's why they're looking for subsidies. We do have some recommendations. We recommend that chemical recycling should be defined to specify polymer-to-polymer processes, plastic, and exclude plastic to fuel. Mechanical recycling should be prioritized over chemical recycling. And chemical recycling should only be employed on plastic fractions that cannot be handled mechanically. We're seeing more and more reports that chemical recycling is competing with mechanical recycling for PET. Plastic to fuel should be defined as a form of disposal, not renewable energy or recycling. And the public should not subsidize or facilitate collection of plastic for chemical recycling or plastic to fuel. And here's our website and my contact information, and I will turn it back over to the chair. I hope that was speedy enough.
Did a great job and you got right to the point. Thank you very much. So we're at 10:35. We're actually supposed to be moving on to our other item, but we had an hour for this and we got cut short because of the item before it. There's a couple of commissioners that had put in asterisks in the chat, so I'm going to start with them and then we'll take public comment and see how far we can get and still get to a few items at the end of our agenda. So Commissioner Vice Chair Valle, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Tangri, are you familiar with the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act of 2020, introduced by Senator Udall? And do you think that that would be helpful on a national basis? And how do you think it would impact California?
I am generally familiar with it. I hope you don't expect me to cite chapter and verse. I do support it. We've gone over the legislation. I mostly don't work on federal policy, so there's other people on the team who do that. But we did make recommendations to Senator Udall's office, and I think most of those were taken up. I think that would be helpful. I think the impacts would be to push us away from single-use plastics and towards more reusable systems. You know, from small things like mandating, you know, water bottle refill stations to, you know, creating more sort of business opportunities in the reuse and refill sector.
And John, just to your point, Alameda County has banned polystyrene in the retail food industry, restaurants and takeouts and so forth. We've done that for quite a number, it's been at least 3 or 4 years. That's an entire county, one of the biggest counties in the state. But we as a company did do collection of polystyrene, and that's industrial commercial, for a city that we had under contract, and we were holding those material in 14 cubic yard boxes. We started running out of boxes before we could even make a pallet or a brick of that material, and it was very cumbersome and difficult to work with. We gave it up after we had a fire, and the polystyrene caught fire, and the firefighters would get anywhere near it once we told them what it was because of the toxicity of the flame and the smoke. And fortunately for us, that's what started the ban on polystyrene in the retail food restaurant industry in Alameda County. So we've had some experience with polystyrene. It hasn't been a good one. So I think it's really important that if you try to capture polystyrene in large quantities, you're going to need a lot of space. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, that's basically.
So you got my contact information if you want some follow-up on any of those questions, Commissioner.
I think it's going to translate to dollars because space and insurance and all that equals dollars. So it just add to the cost of how much would have to be paid for the material to make the system work, I think is what the commissioner's saying, right? Yeah. And then Commissioner Lapis, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. It's nice seeing both of you. John, you and I have talked about this a little bit in the past, but I'm curious in the context of this conversation of the commission, the one issue that I keep coming back to is that we're lumping in very different technologies with very different feedstocks and very different outputs under one umbrella. And I believe, I think you've made the argument that your technology doesn't make fuel. You're doing plastic to plastic recycling, in which case I think I'm not exactly sure why it's being lumped in with those other technologies. I guess it's not in any way prohibited in California. It counts as recycling if you're able to make the economics work. If the question is whether or not we like it, I think a lot of that probably comes down to seeing a mass balance of what goes in, what comes out, how much are you actually recovering, what the other emissions are, and runtime, just to make sure it works so it's not a boondoggle, so we're not funding facilities that are going to take up a whole bunch of money and then never actually work. But beyond that, from a policy perspective, there's nothing in California law limiting your technology or disadvantaging it in any way, is there?
Thanks, Commissioner Lapis. The limitations really in California regulation are where these technologies get lumped into the same regulations with incineration. transformation. So in Cal Recycles defined the term transformation, and it includes incineration, pyrolysis, any technology that includes incineration, pyrolysis, or distillation. I think, if the industry could have one thing in California, it'd be that those two things are just recognized as different and requiring different regulatory environments. That lumping anything in that requires distillation as transformation. Well, distillation is used in lots of technologies, right? Water purification. When we were in Vancouver, we saw antifreeze being recycled. It requires distillation. So just the recognition that incineration and these technologies are different. And then to some of your other questions, one that I've talked about the International Sustainable Carbon Certification. That's why I think that's important to answer that a third party, and if it's from a regulatory standpoint, maybe Cal Recycle's a third party. From a private sector standpoint, we've been using ISCC. But I think that third party that can look at that mass balance and see and report back what the efficiency is of the process. I think and then as far as the recommendations, I think the most surprising thing to me about these two presentations you just saw is I think we would mostly agree on the recommendation slide of Dr. Tandri, right? That was, as he went through his presentation, I thought, well, geez, there's talk about consensus. I think we would mostly agree that we should, we should not direct plastics that can be mechanically recycled to advanced recycling facilities. We should promote polymer to polymer recycling, and that plastics to fuel is a different bucket. I think did I answer your questions?
It does. I mean, it sort of highlights that maybe you're not the right person to present for ACC, because I don't think your technology isn't necessarily one that is limited. To your earlier point, I don't think you would require a transformation permit if you're making a polymer to polymer, if it's a polymer to polymer process. You would need a transformation permit if you're making fuel. And I think that's the kind of more important distinction is input and output in my mind. If you're making fuel, I don't care if it's transformation, if it's combustion, pyrolysis, gasification. If you're making fuel, you're making fuel or energy. Right. And then alternatively, we have, for example, woody biomass gasification is considered biomass, the same as any other. That was a change that was made into the law. So, yeah, I agree the definition is broken, but I believe it should be brought into the same. I think transformation should include those other technologies as long as they're making fuel or energy. And that's the more important distinction. And I don't believe, from what I understand, that's what you're proposing.
Right. No, I would agree. I was, I would agree. I won't say anything else. I did want to point one thing out about some of the numbers. So we started that facility in 2019, making product. I just would maybe look at 2019 numbers as opposed to 2018 before the facility was operational.
Okay, I'm going to unfortunately call this entire discussion because we're only 15 minutes away from the end of the meeting. And as you know, it's not publicly noticed longer. They could literally turn it off, and it causes problems. And I think the bigger thing here is we just got a very brief introduction to this big discussion. I heard Commissioner Sky say that we should have a deeper dive on some of this, and I think it's important to make sure that there's a fairness in how that three-part test is being applied. That's the first I'd heard that there was an issue there. So I would just make a quick proposal that maybe Commissioner Sky and I work on a process to either have a separate meeting or a discussion with Cal Recycle on that sort of thing and bring it in front of the commission or maybe a committee, or we have another workshop, or that's just about these different technologies. This was just one, or we can just have a discussion around the, I see some heads shaking no. And I know some of you don't really want to discuss this anymore, but there are different technologies under this rubric. And I guess my thing is that the commission is clear on what is actually recycling, which one of those technologies do we, if any of them, want to help with, market development. And then we were going to discuss at the next meeting using of taxes and subsidies as tools to drive certain things. Do we want to discuss that still? And if we do we want to discuss, some of the issues here about making sure they're not subsidized, or certain types of processes are not subsidized or are taxed differently? I don't know. It's up to you. It's a market development materials question, but I don't see how we're going to have it here today unless we had a longer meeting. So I'm going to suggest we probably need to discuss having this under the agenda item on next agendas and how we're going to deal with this. It's a way bigger issue than we have time to deal with today in an hour. So I'm very sorry. There's lots of discussion still that we had, but we only have 13 minutes left. So I'm going to say thank you so much to our two presenters, and we've got your PowerPoints, we've got your contact information. Commissioners, committee chairs can reach out to them individually as well. And I'm very sorry we got shortchanged on this even further than we had planned because of the discussion beforehand. So thank you very much, Dr. Tangri. Thank you very much, John and Mr. Timbers, for your presentation. And we'll also take a lot more comments on this, and then we're going to discuss how to deal with this in our last agenda item about future agenda items. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it so much. And I'm sorry, commissioners that wish to speak. There was just no more time. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to agenda item number 6 on update on legislation. And I don't know, is Mindy on the line here? And if not, we can just quickly go over some of the bills that we know of. I don't see her. So, and I thought she was going to submit a written outline.
Hi guys, I am here.
Oh, you're
and
Zoe.
We do have. Hi there. I am. That's weird.
That's why I lost you.
That is hilarious. I am not Zoe. I am Mindy. We do have a couple of slides. There isn't that much new in terms of legislation, but a few bills I can highlight. Can we get? I'm sure we'll advance the slide quickly. Okay, so the new bills since last time are SB 244, which is lithium-ion batteries, illegal disposal. This bill is a repeat from... By
the way, just for some reason it's not going up the whole...
Yeah, we can also, send this along so you guys will have it. But this one is a repeat from last year, and it didn't move forward partially because of COVID and partially because they needed to work a couple of things out. But it basically requires CalRecycle and DTSC as well as CAL FIRE to develop some protocols for handling lithium-ion batteries. SB 289 Newman is also obviously a Senate bill, and this is a spot bill on EPR for batteries and battery-embedded products. So the scope is really loose batteries from households and any kind of battery-embedded product, including things like scooters, but not including vehicle batteries, car batteries. AB 332, hazardous waste, treated wood waste. I'm sure a lot of you know about this issue, that there was, waiver to handle this material, and that's gone away. And so now there's an effort to reinstate that conversation, and I'm sure both DTSC and CalRecycle will be involved in that discussion as it moves forward. Next slide. Thank you. We've talked about these bills. Not much has changed on them. Obviously, they don't have policy committees yet, but SB 38 would transition the bottle bill program to an EPR program. SB 54 is continuing the discussion on packaging in the Senate, and SB 207 would require a Cal EPA to set up a advisory council on solar panels, basically. So similar to the process that went on with lithium-ion batteries for vehicles.
Can I ask a question on that one, Mindy?
Sure.
I've heard this is an author-sponsored bill, and we waited 5 years to get the regs to declassify solar panels to be universal waste, and now we're going to start a commission. What I'm worried, I guess, has CalRecycle taken any position on this, or anybody? Because I mean, they're coming fast and furious now. We're getting complaints from the public. They have nowhere to really bring them still. And another commission that, I mean, how long and what is their goal, and when are they going to have to come up with something? Because we're out of time. These things can't go on for years and years and years.
Right. Certainly, we share your concern on figuring out how to properly dispose and if we can recycle the material from solar panels. We don't have a position on this bill, of course. We will, of course, be involved and provide technical assistance and talk to the author and try to figure out where we can be helpful. But at this point, we do not have a position on any of these bills.
And you said this was like the battery working group, I think, on auto batteries, wasn't it, that DTSC is doing? And what has that committee done? And how long is it taking?
It's taking longer than the legislature wanted, I can tell you that. And part of that is difficult, just like your commission, you're finding it's very difficult to staff bills that don't include staffing. And that was true of the last advisory commission, and I'm sure that there will be an effort to do that on this one as well. They take a lot of staff time and work, and usually it's an addition. And also something that needs to be done collaboratively throughout Cal EPA. So those kinds of processes take time. And so I would need to check in with DTSC on how that is going for an update. But in general, these advisory committees do take a lot more time because of the things that you guys are experiencing now. So
although we had
note, it's not an intention to take longer or not being a priority or any of that. There are also many other priorities as well.
Yeah, well, I guess I just want to highlight that we got to be really careful, especially if we're going to weigh in on bills, that if they're going to be commissions and stuff, not every commission runs like ours. And we've got 19 recommendations out in 6 months, and that's pretty much unprecedented. But I would be worried that these things slow down a solution. But anyway, so you can proceed. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just a note on the last slide. It just shares that the bill introduction deadline is February 19th, so we will have a much better idea of the portfolio of bills on recycling and waste management at that point. And many of them will still be spot bills, but we will have an idea of the interest from the legislature in having these discussions at that point.
And Mindy, I heard there's a budget trailer bill, something about the bottle bill. Are there any other budget trailer bills or items that you could share with us that
yeah, I can tell you that included in the governor's budget proposal is a trailer bill. Well, it's an expansion of the pilot programs, and that would include trailer bill language, because to expand the pilot programs, the budget includes $5 million more for pilots, and then trailer bill would expand the pilots to allow for up to 5 additional pilots, and then expand the time frame. The sunset is in 2022, I believe, and then we would move that to 2024 was the original proposal.
So these are the bottle bill pilots that we're actually sending a letter on right now that we just approved today. So I don't know, Commissioner Donlevy, did you want to, since you and I have worked on this bill, is it going to affect our sending this letter in any way? I just want the commissioners to have the whole picture.
No, I think we send the letter as is, and just try and get more information on the trailer bill. I mean, expanding from 5 to 10 pilot programs, I think only delays real reform. And then Mindy, is it $5 million total for all 10 programs? What's the interpretation on the funding?
No, AB 54 from 2019 allocated $5 million for the pilots, and so that $5 million is already available for the existing approved pilots. So this would be an additional $5 million for a total of 10.
Okay. We'll have to talk about it later, but the letter will go then as is, but I just want to make sure all the commissioners know that there is some proposed language in the budget trailer bill to add more money and more pilots to the bottle bill program. And there have been concerns about those pilots and so forth that we've discussed, so I just want to make sure everybody's aware of it. we can follow it. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mindy. Appreciate it. And then if you can send me the slide decks in advance, even the morning of next time, I'll upload it to the Google Docs. Everybody's got them, unless they're already up on the web page. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left, and we've got 3 or 4 items here, so we're going to move fast. The review of a response to the commission report. I will just share that I said at the beginning, we've put in anything that the press has picked up about the commission's report, or talking with any of you, you know, that's been posted in the Google document under press, commission, media. I think it's press, commission. So you can check Waste Dive, Waste 360. I presented, I was the keynote at the SWANA WasteCon conference last week, and I did put like 5 slides about the commission and, you know, encourage people to follow us and give us comments. So hopefully that helped get the word out too. Got emails from that as far away as Guam. So we are being watched, and in a good way. And if you have any other things you want to share, any other commissioners, I know there's a lot of people in the chat box that were from other items. So I'm going to just go down to the very bottom because we did not. So Commissioner Ward, did you have something to speak to about this?
Yeah, this is for agenda items for next meeting.
Okay, then we'll just hold on that for just 1 second. And is there anybody else that have anything to update on the response to the commission report? All I've heard is unbelievable, great job, keep it up. So thanks to everybody. We'll move on then to agenda item 8. And that's the agenda items for future meetings. So where we had left it was we were going to keep 2-hour meetings. You can tell how tight this is going to be with 2-hour meetings. We may want to expand it. I'm going to throw that out there in case anybody wants to have more time. But Eunomia was discussed as inviting the consultancy Eunomia to present on how their report and their research on taxes and subsidies can affect the whole system, the whole rate structure. As you know, we're fighting with recycling, an upstream fight against the cost of the subsidization of virgin materials. And taxes can also be employed to balance that out. So if you still want that, we can do that at the next meeting, but that would take up a good hour again of a 2-hour meeting. Did anybody have any thoughts? Commissioner Ward and then Commissioner Sky.
Yes, I totally support that. And actually, towards that end, I want to officially transmit to Commissioners Lapis and Toyota a policy proposal I drafted regarding the donut economics and materials management strategies, because I think part of the issue with we were just dealing with plastics is we have to deal with the underlying incentives that bring materials to be cheap within our economy. And that deals with subsidies, but it also deals with those overarching materials policies. And I encourage that 2-member group to bring forth whatever it is they are so that we can start those discussions, because I anticipate those will be some of the more detailed discussions and more difficult ones that our commission faces. So I just wanted to officially transmit what I've already done so that they can consider those ideas, and then encourage them to bring whatever they can forward as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Sky, and we've got literally 1 minute.
I think because of the cutoff discussion we had today, I would like to bring back the discussion about advanced recycling and conversion technologies. There's a lot that we didn't get a chance to discuss, and I thought Commissioner Lapis brought up a lot of good points about the aspects of these technologies that we want to encourage. I think that's part of our role. If they do meet the definition, how do we make sure that we maximize the recovery of actual materials, that we have a net reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and minimize residuals, and address the contaminants that the professor from Gaia had brought up, because these technologies should be part of that solution. And the other aspect that we didn't really touch on at all is organic waste. So I'd ask that we have a presentation from the Bioenergy Association of California, because there's definitely a double standard on fuel production. It's already there with anaerobic digestion and biomass conversion, and we should clarify that in what we try to incentivize.
It's 11 o'clock already, and so I'm going to propose that we have to go to a 3-hour meeting, or we're not going to be able to get these things done. We're not even able to finish our agenda items. And so for the next meeting, we're not going to be able to add any more advanced recycling and do taxes and still have committee reports and discussions on any policy. Can we go to a 3-hour meeting? Would you guys be okay with that for the next meeting? Yeah. All right. We tried. All right. So the committees, we'll do a 3-hour meeting. So we'll go from 9 to noon, the next one. How's that? And then we'll add a discussion about the Eunomia, and we'll add a discussion, and I'm going to work on the committee report outs in writing so that you all have that in advance for the next meeting, and the 2-person committees as well. So thank you all so much. Thanks to our presenters. Sorry we ran out of time, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, and have a very happy Valentine's Day. All right. Thanks so much.